for open source stuff, there's a lot of value in unit tests.
Mm-hmm.
And like, especially for final form, every bit of it is like the code coverage on the unit test is near 100% because that gives me the confidence that if someone has submitted a PR and it's passed all the tests, that it's not breaking other stuff, right? Or if someone submits a PR and doesn't have a test to test the new functionality, it's clear that the code coverage has gone down, and you can be more strict about that. So that's extremely important for library code like that to have unit. And the way Redux Form was built, there was no way to do render props. It had to be a higher order component structure. And so I got to thinking about all these things, and I had the epiphany one day that form state is not, it's not framework dependent at all. However you're using to render something, that's totally separate from form state. Form state will always be, here's a list of inputs, here's some validation on it, here's what to do when you submit. If something goes wrong on the submit, you have to come back and display those. Just eagerly saying yes to every feature request and sure, I'll build that because it was fun and it made it more useful for other people, but it ended up with a really huge bundle size, and I hadn't been considering that when I was adding in all these features. So one of the things that's really important to us on our team is what a term I'm calling time to first app.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to run an npx command in the terminal and npm install, and immediately you have an app that is like putting a button in the Attio UI. That's so we want to get that down to just less than 5 minutes to start from zero to having something in your UI. It's going through our custom renderer that is converting your JSX to JSON, which we're sending securely back out of the iframe to our web app. And then we have full control over the components that we render, which is super powerful because it lets developers write in React, which feels super common and ergonomic and whatever. But you can't include a div, for example, because you can only use the components that we give.
Today's guest is Erik Rasmussen, currently Principal Product Engineer at Attio, but probably better known by most of you as the creator of Redux Form and React Final Form. Erik's been shipping frontend since the late 90s, and he's seen the entire arc of the modern web, from Java to React and Xstate to building custom renderers and secure iframes at Attio today. His built design system, wizards, multi-app CRMs, games, and even social video overlays before TikTok was a thing. Erik, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me. Yes. Wow. When you list all the things like that, it sounds impressive.
It is impressive. It is for sure. But let's start with, how did you get started in programming? What was your first steps into this field?
So when I was a child, my father was, although he was really sort of a government bureaucrat, he was interested in computers when the personal computers came out. And so he got some of the early computers, and out of his curiosity, he became the expert in his department about computers, because everyone was like, computers, these are newfangled things. So anyway, I was exposed to computers from a very young age, and was always fascinated by, even back, I guess the first programming was where there would be a basic program that was published in a magazine, and you would go and you would actually copy letter by letter into the computer, and then the fact that that you could make it do things and print different things and show loops and stuff. I just love that stuff from the very beginning. So it was never any doubt in my mind what I would do when I grew up. And
That's nice.
yeah, so I've been programming ever since then. And yeah, well, like I was programming before the internet, and when the internet came along, I I saw how cool web pages could be, and then I watched as web pages went from just static files to have some sort of script execute on the back end and CGI bin or whatever turn into like the fact that you could have a web page that like loaded some data from somewhere was like mind blowing at the time, because previously it was just here's an HTML file.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's been a journey.
What about your first job as a programmer when you got paid? What were you doing? What was it like?
So I was doing that like when I was in high school. My father worked at a government organization for it was a place where they took care of mentally disabled people,
Hmm.
and he saw firsthand all the paperwork and stuff that had to happen, and a nurse would have to come and evaluate, can this person is are they learning to brush their teeth or whatever, and there was all this paperwork. And so he, being the computer nerd that he was, had the idea, well, what if we like made a made a program where you could type this stuff in, and then you could see like progress over time in a way that you can't just filling out stuff on a clipboard. So he started a little company to build that, mainly just for his employer, but he was able to sell it to several other similar institutions. So my first programming job was like working for him, building that's it's just a simple database. And then, I mean, to be honest, it's still what we do. There's a thing where you type stuff in and it goes into a database record, and then there's another page that lists them and you can click on them. Like, it's just CRUD all the way down, like it always has been.
Scrolled all the way down. And
So
what did you use as a programming language for that, if you can
that
remember?
was, I feel like it's called DB2,
Okay.
ancient, old IBM DB2 is a database. Yeah. And then later it got upgraded to FoxPro, which are like things that I haven't thought about in
I
years.
also used Fox Pro, so in
Did
high
you?
school.
Okay.
So yeah, okay. So
Nice. Okay.
we're getting.
Got some overlap.
I'm also yeah. I'm also a little old.
Yes. But like I did a research project for like I had to do a science research project, and I compared different programming, like three programming languages that I knew, of how fast they could draw things on the screen. Again, this is
Hmm.
just like text based in DOS or whatever, and how fast they could calculate these things. And so I wrote up this, like, in high school where they're teaching you what a formal science paper looks like, and you have a hypothesis and a conclusion and blah, blah, blah. And so like one of my projects was doing that with these different, different languages, which is, I mean, so I've always been in this world.
So benchmarking before benchmarking was a thing, like
Right, exactly.
comparing.
Like, how fast can it print, 50, or how fast can it print 500 lines to the terminal? Like,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, so stuff like that.
Cool. And now that you're all the way at the top, principal engineer at Atio, how is your day to day as a principal engineer?
Well,
Actually, first, what does Atio do? Makes it simple. Let's talk a little bit about it.
yes, Attio is building the next generation CRM. CRM is customer relation management. It's like we're directly competing with Salesforce, basically. Like
Hmm.
that's the CRM that everyone has heard of. In fact, I think they're like their stock ticker is CRM. Kind of funny.
Ah, that's
Uh,
cool.
and
Or HubSpot,
so
right?
HubSpot is the second one, and then Attio is quickly chasing after right behind. So like Attio isn't ready for, you know church. Salesforce has someone like Oracle as a client. Like, we're not ready for that level
Hmm.
of giant corporation, but we are very popular among startups, among the YC folks, and as well as venture capital investors. They also need a CRM. And to be honest, once you have a business and you have like more than 2 clients, you like already sort of need a CRM to keep track of who when was the last time you spoke to this organization, or who on your team was the last one to talk to them, or I mean, really like running a podcast you could do with a CRM too, to like keep a list of potential guests or whatever, or
Do have something like that, yes.
right. So anything where you need just a little bit of organization and it involves people and communication, you really need a CRM to like. So while it's a seemingly boring like space, there's actually some really interesting problems to be solved there and interesting ways to go about it. And like, because it's such a well developed space, it's like we know the features we need to build because people have gone before us. Excuse me. But we're also in the age of AI, where like there's certain we don't want to. There are a lot of startups now that are like AI first CRM, but I think you can go really wrong if you season everything with your AI salt, right? Like you need to be very, very thoughtful about when you employ an LLM. So we're doing that. My particular role at Attio is, I think it's the most exciting. Is we're building an ecosystem to allow third parties to add like extensions, integrations. We're calling them apps. Like imagine there's an app store where you can go and you can like a CRM is only as powerful as where it can suck data in from, right? Because no one wants to actually type in all the data into a CRM. If you can have one that can read your email and do some thinking about your email, and then so we're building this way for third parties to write code that like runs like inside Attio, but in a really secure way, which that's pretty cool.
So basically, your users are other developers. Your team's users.
My team's users are other developers, and that's why I love it, and that's why they hired me from my open source experience, because I love it when my clients are other developers. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's just because I can relate to them or what, but like I really enjoy building ergonomic SDKs and APIs and things.
It's cool. Can you tell me like 3 things that are like mandatory for developer experience? What would you want to build for other developers to make it seamless?
Right. So one of the things that's really important to us on our team is what a term I'm calling time to first app. Like you need to be able to run an npx command in the terminal and npm install, and immediately you have an app that is like putting a button in the Attio UI. That's so we want to get that down to just less than 5 minutes to start from zero to having something in your UI. Okay. Compare this to like the version of this in Salesforce is they have their own like flavor of Java, which shows how long ago they started building their ecosystem. And you have to do all this crazy setup and stuff. It's super convoluted. Just the tutorial video for it is like 30 minutes long.
Wow.
So and because they're using that older technology and we're using, modern TypeScript. And so as soon as you start with your app, you run it in dev watch mode, and then it's bundled your JavaScript, uploaded it to Attio, and you can see your widget on the screen. And then you can click on it and you can change the copy, and it like hot reloads, and like do you remember before hot reloading, building web apps, where you had to go and hit refresh after every change?
Or restart the gulp server.
Or restart the whole web server sometimes. Yeah. So like that sort of good developer experience tightens that iteration loop as tight as you can get it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to think something, type it, and see it as fast as possible. So that's super important.
That's very cool.
And just the ergonomics, like using TypeScript, again, the main value of TypeScript when you're using a well-typed library is that you get that immediate feedback. It tightens that loop. So it's not like, okay, let me try this. And then you have to go and refresh the page and you see an error and you have to go see, okay, what's the line number for the error? Let me go back to look at my code. Like that's the way web dev used to be. But now if we can catch the fact that, hey, you're missing a prop or whatever immediately, then yeah, it just makes for a better, easier experience.
It also, you have the autocomplete, which basically is a documentation of the library.
Yes.
So you can see what methods there are, what you can use. I find
And, LLMs are really good at that, again, speeding up that iteration cycle so much faster, where it'll see a thing and like auto fix it, not even auto complete, but sometimes it'll just immediately fix it. So that's very cool.
And what about documentation? How
And
did you
writing
find
good
it?
documentation is very important. We're hosting our documentation with a company called Mintlify, and they have this built-in feature where, first of all, you can do this search, this like LLM style search to just ask it a question, and it'll direct you to the right page in the docs. But also, they like have an MCP server that you can just plug right into your IDE and say, okay, I'm using this library. Here are all the docs, and it can go and
That's amazing.
yeah. So like at this point, we're not writing docs for humans,
Mm-hmm.
right? Humans are
You're
not the
writing for
target of the documentation anymore. You still want to write it in as clear English as possible because that's what the LLMs need and want. But it's not humans that are going to be reading your docs anymore, which is
that's true.
kind of a crazy statement.
Do you think this will make documentation in a way like, I guess it's better now to write more documentation because the AI can consume it easier than a human would. Before we
Right.
had to be like, okay, here's the point, here's the three things, right? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, and the how pretty your doc site is, it doesn't matter anymore either. Like, I mean, your docs are typically written in Markdown anyway, and which LLMs really love, and you can make your doc site really pretty. Like Mintlify does a great job of that,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the more examples you can give, the more this is the correct way, this is the incorrect way, this is another incorrect
Exactly.
way. The more of that you can give, and which can be super useful for humans too. Like I've read docs like that and been like, oh, okay, this makes more sense now with these 7 examples or whatever. But yeah, you are rewarded for verbosity in docs.
That's cool. And what about, are you writing your SDKs framework agnostic, or do you have like an SDK for each, like React, Vue, Angular?
No, we're going full in on React
Okay.
because that's the ubiquitous framework. That's the one that not only is it easy to hire junior devs to do that, it's also the framework that LLMs are going to default to if you
True.
don't tell them otherwise. While the other frameworks can do custom renderers, React is very good at doing custom renders. So the way our apps work inside our web app, obviously you can't just take some third-party JavaScript and run it in your web app because it can read all your cookies and it can open windows and fetch this and fetch that and query your, with all of your credentials. Like, no, can't.
Yeah.
So the way we do it is we open an iframe on a separate domain, so it has none of the cookies.
Mm-hmm.
And in there we don't just run your third-party JavaScript there. There we boot up a JavaScript runtime written in it's like running in WASM. There's like some C and some Rust and stuff. Like we're running our own little JavaScript runtime. It's like a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a little node thing, but not fully node, where we give exactly the APIs that we want to expose. So like if you upload some code in an app to Attio, they can't, you can't fetch, you can't close the window, you can't look at the documents, you can't, like, that just isn't available to you.
Mm-hmm.
We only get you the stuff we want to let you have. Like you can have set timeout, for example, or set interval, but not all of JavaScript.
Okay.
And then we have a way, so in there, you can render React components, but you're not rendering to the DOM because there is no DOM in that JavaScript runtime. It's going through our custom renderer that is converting your JSX to JSON, which we're sending securely back out of the iframe to our web app, and then we have full control over the components that we render, which is super powerful because it lets developers write in React, which feels super common and ergonomic and whatever, but you can't include a div, for example, because you can only use the components that we give you. And sometimes when I'm coding with an LLM, it'll try and put a div in there, and I'll have to be like, no, this is not DOM. But so like it makes the SDK, makes the developer experience again more familiar than if
Mm-hmm.
we were having you give back some bizarre JSON object or something. The fact that you can write in React and you can do things like you can use React Query.
Okay.
If you fetch some data and you can cache it with React Query and have all the power of that, and your components can suspend, and like it's extra powerful.
That seems very nice and complicated, to be honest. How big is your team size?
My team, I mean, just those of us that are working on the SDK,
Mm-hmm.
there's like 3 or 4 of us. Yeah, really 3. There's other people on the what we call the ecosystem team that are mainly like for the backend REST API stuff, but that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of separate from this project.
And the runtime is also handled by your team, or do you have like a platform
Yes.
team that handles this?
No,
Nice.
we handle the runtime as well, and
Oh, that's
the
cool.
CLI tool. But like, there's
I guess
quite a bit.
in today's age, it's better to be small, right? To move faster in a way.
Yes, and like now we're to the point where we're releasing, like, people that we don't know are building apps using our SDK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's published docs and people are starting to use it, and so we have to be extremely sensitive to breaking changes and stuff. Like we, you know,
Yeah.
if we change something, we need to deprecate it for 6 months or something, and then, you know, you have to be not quite as strict as like React is itself, where it takes things are deprecated for like
Years.
4 years before they're removed. But yeah, like that.
Have you had any problems so far with deprecating some features and some people complaining? How do you handle it?
Not yet. A couple times we've had to change something, and we've specifically gone and told the developer, "Hey, this we're changing the way we're doing this," and normally they're responsive enough to that.
Okay.
It's
So you
all
have access to the people who are using your SDK.
to some of them, yeah. So it's still super early days yet. It's not like there's 100,000 people out there using this yet. It's more a matter of a couple dozen, but it will be.
But when you were building Redux Form, though, it has like millions of downloads. How do you
Yes.
handle their breaking changes?
Well, when I was building that and it was really successful, I didn't really make a lot of breaking changes. It was a lot of it was here's a Boolean config parameter that you can pass in, and if you pass that in, then it's going to change the behavior in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, just adding to the API. And so one of the mistakes I made with Redux Form was just eagerly saying yes to every feature request, and like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, I'll build that, because it was fun and it made it it made it more useful for other people, but it ended up with like a really huge bundle size. And like I hadn't been considering that when I was adding in all these features, which is why in my second form library, I made it more modular where you can only, there's a core bit. And then if you need other functionality, you can like plug other bits in as you need them.
Oh, that's cool. Tell me about the journey. Why did you build it? Redux Form. How do you get started?
I mean, that's like before React was released, I was using Angular 1,
Yeah,
which
same.
was amazing. It was the best thing out there at the time. And when they released React and people were like, why is there HTML in my JavaScript? Like people did not like JSX at first, although
Yeah.
all the Angular directives are kind of also discussing, but whatever. But like something about React like immediately clicked with me and I was like, oh, this is the future. I'm going to build all my side projects with this now. And I had a side project going where it was, you can think of it like maybe like making a LinkedIn profile, like the user could put in their job history and stuff. And
Hmm.
that's like 15 inputs. And at the time, React gave, I think to this day, they only teach you how to have a single input
Hmm.
uh, in the docs, right?
Yeah,
And I used to joke that that's because Facebook only has the one input. Just not wrong. But
that's true.
so it was one of these things that immediately it was painful to try and wrangle these values and how do we do validation? And in the same way that like the React router guys started playing with React immediately and realized that there's no routing system here. We need a routing system. And so they built one. And it turns out literally everyone also needed a routing system. And it turns out literally everyone needed a form library. And this was, I don't know if I was doing something before Redux Form, but like Redux, you know, state management in React was always really complicated. And then they were like, you need the one-way data flow. And then they said, we're using this thing in-house that we call Flux. Here's a
Yeah.
diagram of what it looks like, but no source code. And so then there was all of these people building Flux libraries, all like with weird Back to the Future puns. And then when Redux came out again, it was one of those moments of this is the right way. Like this
Yeah.
is the way it should be. Um, and I had been following Redux like before it was announced. I was in the Slack where they were talking about it and going back and forth. So like I was very aware of it. And so I thought, well, you could use that to manage form state.
Hmm.
Put it all in your in a in a I guess Redux store, and you have an on change action and an on blur action, and you just change your state there, and it worked pretty well. The thing about form state is it's the quickest that a user is changing your application state. Unless you're tracking like the X and Y of the mouse, someone typing is the most quick changes to your application state. And turns out Redux was just perfectly fine to handle that and be a controlled component, controlled input. But then the general nature of Redux is that it's global. And with every single action, it has to go and ask all the reducers, hey, do you care about this action? Hey, do you care about this action? And so if you had a giant Redux thing with, you know, 200 different reducers everywhere, that had to be asked about every single action. That was like not very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just grew out of necessity, and it was amazing how quickly it was clear that everyone else was having the same pain point and would make pull requests and add features and stuff. Like there were a couple times where I needed a feature from Redux Form, and I went and I looked and it was already there. It hadn't been but I had approved it at the time or whatever, but then my needs came across, oh, I need this feature, and I was like, huh, look, it's already there, which is kind of cool.
Were you approving every PR? Do you had other core maintainers?
Yes, I think I was probably doing most of the approving myself. At some point I had some help. It's yeah, it was mostly it was mostly just me. I learned for open source stuff, there's a lot of value in unit tests.
Mm-hmm.
And like, especially for final form, every bit of it is like the code coverage on the unit test is near 100%, because that gives me the confidence that if someone has submitted a PR and it's passed all the tests, that it's not breaking other stuff, right? Or if someone submits a PR and doesn't have a test to test the new functionality, it's clear that the code coverage has gone down, and you can be more strict about that. So that's extremely important for library code like that, to have unit
Makes
tests.
sense. Do you keep the same mentality in Attio with your SDK?
Some things. So unit tests are absolutely required if you're doing something that is just like a pure function that's calculating or parsing or something like that. Like that sort of stuff for sure needs unit tests. For UI and stuff, not that's not that valuable. But one thing that we're going to be focusing on in the coming months is adding lots more strict testing, because
Mm-hmm.
so far we've been more in the exploring, inventing stage. And for that, if you go quicker if you're not testing everything. But then once you sort of understand what the API looks like and feels like, then it's important to go back and put in all the tests. Because
Nice.
yeah.
And do you know what type of tests you're gonna do? Like, are you gonna use Storybook? Um, I don't know. Playwright end-to-end test. I'm really curious how would you test an SDK library like yours? It's also very unique in a way.
Yeah, so it needs to, like, each of our components needs to output needs to be rendered through our custom renderer to the correct JSON. And so we can test up to that point. And then on the other side, we can test how the web app is consuming this JSON and how it's rendering its stuff. And we already have elsewhere, we have some visual regression tests with Playwright
Mm-hmm.
that draw render components, and then we'll catch if a button gets too big or something.
Okay.
So like that, we also have some tests for the CLI that is actually, because we have this command that will, like your the command to initialize an application. And we've got tests that run that initialization step and then make sure that all the proper files are there. And you can build with npm and yarn and pnpm and bun. So like we test each of those to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
it builds. So things like that, so that we can
Nice.
feel really confident that this is going to work every time.
And for your components, do you also have like a design system, or are they like headless and they can be styled?
The app developer doesn't get any styling
Okay.
freedom at all. We have a very strict design system at Attio. Like if you look at the product, it's clear that we care a lot about design.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have an in-house design system, and we make sure that the components that we render that come out of the app perfectly match our system.
How is your design system built? Like, how does it go from Figma to your SDKs? If you don't mind me asking.
Figma. So like there's a whole team that manages the like our front end components. So like
Mm-hmm.
we've got a common text input that we use everywhere throughout the application, and common buttons and indicators and badges and all that stuff. There is a storybook there, and there is a bunch of Figma stuff, and the designers, when they're helping us to design the apps that we're building in-house, they pull from those components. It's about as deep as my knowledge goes into that.
And you have like a npm package that you install with all the components and designs, tokens and stuff in your team.
It's a package in the mono repo.
Okay. So it's a package in one. But how does your SDK consume it that
So
you
our
ship?
the apps that build stuff with our SDK render to this JSON that gets sent back over to the web app, and then the web app
Okay,
has
and the web app
all the
has the
components.
okay, got it. Interesting. Okay, that's pretty cool. Actually, I
So
saw a
yeah,
video on LinkedIn. I think one of your team members posted of this flow that you're rendering a JSON, you're compiling React to a JSON and then rebuilding the React from a
yes,
JSON.
exactly. But the fact that we're starting with React gives the developer total control to like write a use effect that
Mhm.
goes to update something every 2 minutes or whatever, or control like anything you can do with React. You've got your use states and your suspense, and like I said, React query, and like we're using React final form
Mhm.
in the runtime to manage the form state. The only time I've actually at work consumed one of my open source libraries, if you can believe that.
Did you move from so is React Final Form like an improvement on Redux Form, but
Yes.
without the Redux part? Like you decided, okay, Redux has gotten too bloated.
Okay.
Let me do
So
it agnostic.
yes. So there were several things that I realized when like Redux Form got me in the door doing conference talks. Like I was just minding my own business, making, trying to make Redux Form as good as it could be. And somebody like mentioned me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, maybe this guy can come and talk at our conference." And I wrote back, I'm like, "Sorry, you've mistaken me for someone who's ever done any public speaking or wants to do public speaking. No, thank you." And they were like, "Okay, well, we would fly you out to Bangalore, India, if you could talk about this thing you're passionate about for 45 minutes." I was like, "Well, okay, let's do that." And
You
and
wanted to
then
see India.
I mean, a free trip to India, please. And so and then once I had done that, I understood how amazing conferences are and meeting the other speakers, and the fact that you can potentially travel if you're willing to talk in front of people for a little bit. And, then little by little you get better at the talking and you're less terrified by it. And so now I am totally addicted to speaking at conferences. I love it. Uh, but one of the things that also that gave me, the reason I went there, was I would get feedback from people in person that I wouldn't get online. And some people were asking me, uh, "Hey, we're also using Redux over here in Angular, but we can't use Redux Form. Like, why not? It's just a reducer, right? Like, why is it so tightly coupled to React?" And I was like, "You're correct. It is tightly coupled to React, and there's no good like it grew that way, but it's also I can't separate it out." So like that was just one of the complaints that I got. The
Mhm.
other complaint I got was about bundle size, and this was also right around the time when render props started to be a big deal, a way to inject state into JSX from some third party component.
Mhm.
And the way Redux Form was built, there was no way to do render props. It had to be a higher order component structure. And so I got to thinking about all these things, and I had the epiphany one day that form state is not, it's not framework dependent at all. Like however you're using to render something, that's totally separate from form state. Form state will always be, here's a list of inputs, here's some validation on it, here's what to do when you submit. If something goes wrong on the submit, you have to come back and display those errors. And so there's just this tight bundle of state that is independent of whatever our grandkids are writing their forms on is going to have that same exact problem, even if it's some VR headset, whatever. Like you still have that exact problem. So that was an amazing epiphany to me, and I was like, okay, so I'm going to build that core functionality and then build like a wrapper around that for React. And the other thing about the bundle size was I I realized that I could build that core functionality, but it didn't have to immediately support the ability to have arrays of fields, for example, because not every
Hmm.
form has arrays of fields, but it needed some way to allow that functionality to be plugged in, as well as other like calculations when you change this field, this other field changes. Like there's a bunch of interesting things that having the most popular form library, I learned all these use cases from people all over the world that would never have occurred to me. Like
Hmm.
when I first built Redux Form, like I said, I was building like a little resume thing. And I was like, of course you're going to know the 12 fields that you have at development time. Like you just got, you know what they are. But no, if someone's like, well, I need a button to add a new field. I was like, what do you mean? Dynamic form? What? And so I had all this experience with all these weird use cases. And that allowed me when I built Final Form and Rec Final Form to like I had a list of use cases that I knew I had to hit. And so like I wrote examples for every single one of those. That's I forget what your question was, but about how I
How did you get from
yeah,
Redux Form to React Final Form?
yeah, that's yeah. Okay, so that's exactly what I answered. So, and React Final Form didn't have the success that it could have because I released it like a month after Formic came out,
Hmm.
and Formic was a way to do form state, but where the state is kept in React, but it allowed render props, and
Hmm.
everyone was so thirsty for render props at that time that Formic just took off, and I was right there behind. And like the author of Formic told me that if I had released 2 months earlier, then he wouldn't have even written Formic because that's just what he wanted was to have states with render props. So it goes. And yeah. And in my opinion, Final Form is kind of like software is never complete,
Hmm.
but Final Form handles 99% of use cases as it is at the moment. Like it doesn't need any new features
Hmm.
and it's pretty well battle tested. If there are bugs, they are for weird async validation edge cases that are just so strange that they just don't come up typically. So
Yeah.
that's my
I
journey.
think for me, when I started, not when I started, but I was, when Angular 2 came out, I was working a lot with Angular 2, and I was also building forms a lot. I was working on a back office, basically CRUD, like a more
Yeah,
complex CRUD with data. And I used to love, but
that's what all web
love
apps are.
Angular Form. Like
Yes.
Angular Form was like the best. Did you ever use it for inspiration? Because I see some
No,
similarities there.
I never knew Angular Form because I stopped Angular after Angular 1
Hmm.
and I never got into that. But see, that's the difference between the approach of Angular and React was Angular was more of a framework of here's how you do things the Angular way,
Exactly.
which
Yeah.
is very uh
Opinionated.
yeah, it's opinionated, but it's very comfortable to learn a thing like that because then you just follow the instructions and you're doing it the same way everyone else is doing it. And so if you switch to another project, they're doing it that same way. Like there's a lot of good to that opinionated stuff. And the way React was just like, we'll let the we'll let the free market of npm solve all these problems, and which is also not a terrible approach. Like you end up with some really good solutions that way, but you also end up with this fatigue of like which which of these 12 calendar drop down widgets should I install, right? And then you're counting by GitHub stars, but GitHub stars tend to point you towards the older libraries because the newer ones that might be better haven't been around long enough to collect all the stars. It's a mess out there in JavaScript land. But
How do you do it? How do you choose a good third-party library if you have to add it in your project? Do you look at issues? I personally look at issues and see how fast the maintainer responds. If I see that, I'm like, this is well maintained. The guy seems like a nice guy. Or team.
yeah,
Some people
I
have a
look
team.
at maybe how long ago the last release was.
Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of shows how actively maintained something is. But also just at the docs and the general philosophy of a thing, it's like I say like active maintenance is important, but then I also have a library that I don't actively maintain because I more or less think it's complete. So it's yeah, it's just what you the ergonomics of the API, I guess. But so many of them are so exactly similar. And just like listening to just keeping a general ear open on Twitter and Blue Sky and stuff about what libraries people are talking about. So then when you need a GraphQL library, you've heard of a couple of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask you, because you've worked with form state so long, Redux, state machines like Xstate. How do you normally, when you build a feature, let's say a new project, how do you manage, say, do you go right in and install Xstate or install Redux, or do you have it locally first? What's your opinion on how it should progress?
I don't know. I haven't like started a greenfield project that often. It's I mean, it depends on what it is. If it's a web app, if it's an Electron app, if it's a CLI app, they're all slightly different. There's no one true answer. Like at Attio, I started building the CLI with Xstate because it kind of made sense to me that you're, especially like when you're in dev mode, you're watching and you're getting events back that files have changed, and then you're running a bundler. So now you're in the bundling state, but there could be a JavaScript error, there could be a TypeScript error,
Mm-hmm.
and organizing all of that. And that helped me reason about building it. But then I ended up migrating away from Xstate because for most of the things that the CLI had to do, it wasn't complicated enough uh, to warrant that extra complexity. I mean, Xstate has a learning curve, and if the rest of your team doesn't really understand it, then they can't really review your work and they can't really go and make changes. So it was kind of sad to migrate away from Xstate there. But so like I have had success in other companies where I introduced Xstate and the rest of the team fell in love with Xstate, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a huge success in like orchestrating all these different state machines talking to each other. So it varies. Like there's no one killer answer.
Gotcha. I mean, you've used a lot of tools. What's one of the third-party libraries tools that you think you overused? It's like you always install it. Maybe it's one of yours, but what do you like using all the time?
Well, overused implies that I didn't need it when
No,
I
no. Let's
installed it.
say
I
you
didn't need
did. I'm sure
that.
it has a use case, but yeah.
I mean, Xstate. Like I gotta like I've installed Xstate a lot and used it to build a lot of things. Yeah, I don't have a one particular. I mean, if you don't count React, but no, nothing comes to mind of a as a thing that I over rely on, but always install.
Can you
Well,
explain to me?
okay, no, I take it back. I got to go with Zod
Zod. Okay, yeah, Zod is useful.
because Zod is like I will no longer fetch something from somewhere else without pushing it through Zod to know that what I got back is what I expected. Like the idea of, well, first of all, the idea of writing anything in JavaScript and not knowing exactly what the types are is terrifying. But yeah, having a blob of JSON come back that's just an any, and then like trying to do anything with it is no. So
That's cool.
yeah, that's a clear winner.
Yeah, I love Zod now as well, especially with relying on AI. If you're having something that comes back generated by AI, Zod is such like a savior that checks the response, and you also have like a wrapper on Zod that actually sends the response back to the AI and say, "Hey, it's not correct."
Yeah, right, exactly. and then you can take a Zod error and give it to your AI coding companion and be like, fix this. They'll say, looks like you're assuming that there's going to be more than one value in this array. Okay. So yeah, Zod is super, super useful. And I mean, I think something like, I don't know, you just need runtime type checking these days.
About Xstate, I actually never used it. I know about it. I saw a lot of conference talks about Xstate, but can you tell me what does it do? Convince me to use it as well, like a quick.
Yeah. So a simple example of something that could be a state machine is like, rather than like if you've been in a React component and you needed to fetch something, and while your fetch thing can either be pending because it's not back yet, or an error, or a value. And so those are three distinct states that particular process is in at any given time. And when you have the data back, then you have the data, and when it's an error, you have an error but no data, and when it's pending, you have neither. So like the first gateway into state machines is understanding that and knowing that you need to keep your states as a TypeScript union rather than an is fetching Boolean and then a data value and then an error value. Like those all go together so that when you have an error, you know that error is defined in your value, and you know that the data is not defined in your value. So that's the general. If you're not nodding along to that, then going to X state is just having more states, but also being able to fire off side effects when you enter a state or leave a state, or fire off a like an asynchronous actor, they're called, when you enter a state. So you come into, say you start up your application and your initial state is unauthenticated. And when you enter that state, you go and you fire off a request to see if, first of all, if you have any credentials stored or if you are logged in. And whatever that gives you back, then you can go to the logged in state. And when you're in the logged in state, you can have all these different substates within that, like that is your application. But then you can have the unauthenticated state out here where you have all your logic for logging in that you don't have once you're already in the logged in state. So it breaks your application down into, you can focus on, okay, I'm here and this is what I know to be true at the moment when I'm in this state. I don't have to think about the rest of the application. I just know what is true in this moment, and I can think about what I can do to go in and out of this, or when I can leave this state. Like after I've properly authenticated, then I can just transition over to the login state that you enter the same way you did if you had been logged in when you started. So things like that, it lets you lowers the amount of context that you need to think about a particular bit of logic.
That's pretty cool. I'm guessing it's very popular in games, right? Where you have all these
state machines. Yes, so like the whole state machine concept dates back to like the 1960s or 70s or whatever. I was actually watching a YouTube video about Markov chains and how the very first electronic computer was run at like Los Alamos to run a Markov chain to determine the probability of a nuclear fission reaction or whatever. And it would just dumbly go through these probabilities and see what state it ended up in, and then run it again and count how many times they'd end up in various states. And like that's how they were able to do that calculation. And I was like, wow, the very first computer was running a state machine. But yes, in games, of course, games are nothing but set of states. Like
That's
yeah,
very
I
interesting.
mean, all the way from chess up to Fortnite. It's what states you're in and what you can do when you're in that state.
That's cool. You've been doing this for a long time. What would be one advice you would give a junior developer just coming out of college or trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's a little tough out there right now. I would say.
yeah, Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. I would come up with some pet project that you wanna do. Maybe it can be, you know, your own personal blog or just some interesting thing that you find interesting, like writing a game engine to play tic-tac-toe at any dimension or whatever. Like something silly like that, but is still a coding, interesting coding problem that can be a lot of fun. And put that on GitHub and have a GitHub that you can point a potential employer to be like, hey, I haven't built anything super substantial, but this is just me goofing around, and this is my level of code. And
Yeah, that's cool.
and then if you can advance to like trying to understand an open source project well enough to fix an issue with a PR or something, and because that also one thing they don't real necessarily teach you in computer science school is how much of our jobs is communicating with other humans. It's not all about code. It's you need to make a case for why this PR is the best way to fix this, and understanding the feedback and not getting too defensive when you get bad feedback. Like that's like what we do all day is give feedback and receive feedback and try and make decisions together. So open source is like it's a place where you can do that, and it doesn't cost anything to get into it, and you can get that experience and learn lessons about how to communicate.
How do you recommend someone gets into open source? Like the easiest way?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, first start off with just putting your own little play projects on GitHub, and I mean, hell, do they teach Git in school? Like they
Little.
must,
I guess now they do. They do
right?
a little. When I was in school, no. There
No,
was
of
no
course
Git.
not. Same. So having a mental model for what the hell Git does is pretty important. And I feel like goofing around on GitHub with your own play projects is not a bad way to grow that muscle. And then learning, like you start off and you're just pushing to main all the time. And then you can learn, what the heck a branch is and how that relates to a pull request, and then rebasing and what that is. And so those are things, and probably there's like a bunch of tutorial videos and stuff out there that will teach that. But uh, you need to understand that. And to get into open source, like I said, is just if there's a particular library that you really like and that is small enough for you to get your head around, just try and go and because there will be uh, unanswered issues probably, and you can see if you can address those issues.
So you just go on the issues, find one that's not addressed, and just like, oh, I can do this, and just open a
Yeah,
PR with the
and
solution.
see if you can, and like again, you're going to learn about cloning and branching and stuff. It's going to be hard the first couple times, but then once you get a feel for that and the immense gratification when your pull request is merged, that's one of those things that's always going to make it addictive. The first
Yeah.
time you have a success at something, and you're like, wow, okay, I want to keep doing this. So
And you also get to be part of a community. I remember when my first open source contribution, and only, it was in the Kubernetes
okay.
team, but just like writing documentation,
Again,
helping
documentation is a
translate
thing where you're not going
documentation.
to introduce bugs, but you're going to introduce value,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, writing docs, all the open source maintainers would love to have people writing docs for them. And yeah, just getting the feel for that, and also the satisfaction you have when you realize that, 100 people have downloaded a library that is using some code that you wrote.
Yeah.
Like
Amazing.
that's amazing to be like, my code is out there running on whatever website. So that's a satisfying feeling.
Love it. Final question. What's a book that you would recommend someone read? One of your favorite books, programming, non-programming. What do you think? What would you recommend?
I've never been a programming book person. In fact, I don't think I've read an entire book or even I've read some docs websites from cover to cover before, but never really a book. I can tell you my current favorite book that I just reread in time to watch the movie trailer is a book called Project Hail Mary.
I love it. Yes.
You've read that book?
Yes. It's
It's
also one of my
so
favorites. Yeah.
it's
I need to reread
so
it.
good. Yeah. And even though you know the ending, which is perfect, uh the it's still a thrill to go through. I learned after I read it, I watched some interviews with the author, Andy Weir, and I learned that that's a genre called I think it's called the white room fiction. It
Hmm.
just like in Severance, when the protagonist starts off with amnesia and doesn't know who the hell they are,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a literary device to introduce the reader to what is going on and
Yeah.
necessarily having to explain everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then in this book they do some like flashbacks where he like has a flash memory and was like, oh, okay. But I love that genre. And I also love the like what I love about programming is all the problem solving and like
Hmm.
you fixed a thing and then uh oh, turns out that broke another thing and you need to go and do that. And that book is full of that sort of problem solving and just the sense of humor and the depth that it goes into with the science is just the right amount of depth. Like I don't need to know all about quarks and shit, but
Yeah.
I love going just the right amount of depth into the science. So that is definitely my book recommendation.
I love it. It's
And
actually,
they're making a movie coming out next year. I watched the trailer and,
how
of
do you feel
course
about Ryan Gosling being the
he's
protagonist?
fine. He's a fine casting. Like I don't know, you know, maybe Sam Rockwell or somebody might have been better, but like
Mm.
he did the same sort of thing in the movie called Moon,
Yeah.
where he's sort of stranded. So Ryan Gosling's fine, but I don't know. They messed up I'll
The
say they
Rock
messed up.
introduction?
They messed up one of the spaceships. But I
Okay.
don't want to say any more about that because you really also with this recommendation go in knowing as little as you can because that makes the ride so much better.
And just for our listeners, this book is also the author also wrote The Martian. If you saw the
Yes.
movie with Ben Affleck, and the book, it's
No,
also really, really funny and good book.
not Ben Affleck. Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Yes. Yeah, that's also a really good book. The story about how he wrote that book is wild. He just like was posting it out as a blog as he was writing it, and he would get live feedback when he got something scientifically wrong, and he would go and fix it. And so like he wrote the whole thing, giving it away for free, and then people were like, "Hey, I don't like reading it on your website. Can you like make a Kindle version?" And so he's a computer programmer. He's a web dev by by training, and so he figured out how to make a Kindle book. But Amazon doesn't let you give free Kindle books. You have to charge $1 or something. And so he made that, and even all his fans that had already read it on the website went and bought the Kindle book, and it sort of like shot up the Amazon charts and caught the attention of other people. And then someone was contacting him from Hollywood about can we make this into a movie? And it just like he didn't try, like he just did the open source thing of giving. I'm going to give all this work away because I feel like it, and then success came because it was good.
That's
So
a good success story. It's actually a good
yeah,
book. I love it.
yeah, very good too.
Cool. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you for joining me. It was absolute blast talking to you. Had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Can't wait to see you at a conference.
hope to see you at React Alicante, right? In a couple of
Yes.
months. Cool. See you there.
Okay. Adios.